The sea was loud that morning, not just with waves, but with the sound of history breaking open. Landing craft cut through the cold waters of the English Channel, packed with soldiers who didn't know if they would live to see another sunrise. Among them stood a young American named Henry Parham. He wasn't famous. He wasn't powerful. He was simply one of thousands called into a war that would reshape the world. Yet on that day, as the steel ramp of his craft prepared to drop toward the chaos of Omaha Beach, his footsteps would become part of something far larger than himself. Henry Parham's story began far from exploding shells and machine gun fire. He was born on November 10th, 1921, in Virginia, into a life shaped by poverty and racial division. America in the early 20th century offered little equality to African Americans, and Parham's family lived as sharecroppers working land they did not own, earning just enough to survive. Childhood meant responsibility early. Hard work was not a choice. It was a necessity. But those years also built resilience, the quiet toughness that would define his character later in life. As he grew older, he moved to Richmond, Virginia, searching for opportunity like many young men of his generation. There, he worked modest jobs, including employment as a porter at a bus station. It was not glamorous work. It was long hours, little recognition, and routine effort. Yet it was honest labor, and it taught discipline, showing up every day regardless of comfort or mood. He lived in a society that restricted his rights, but like countless others, he held on to faith, determination, and hope for a better future. That future changed abruptly when war erupted across the globe. By 1942, the United States needed soldiers, and Parham, only 21, was drafted into the U.S. Army. Military service presented a paradox. For Black Americans, they were called to defend democracy overseas while still facing segregation at home. Units were separated by race. Opportunities were limited. Respect was inconsistent. Yet thousands still served, believing their contribution mattered. Parham became part of that generation. Young men stepping into uniform, not because life had prepared them for glory, but because duty required it. Training took him to Camp Tyson in Tennessee, where he entered a specialized role few outside the military understood. He joined the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion, an all-black unit assigned to operate massive tethered balloons designed to protect troops from enemy aircraft. The balloons floated high above battlefields, with steel cables hanging beneath them like invisible barriers in the sky. Enemy planes attempting low attacks risked striking those cables, potentially tearing wings apart or forcing pilots to stay higher, reducing their accuracy. It was defensive warfare that relied on precision, coordination, and endurance. Training demanded patience. Handling hydrogen-filled balloons was dangerous work. Weather could shift without warning. Equipment required constant maintenance, and there was always the risk of explosion or malfunction. Parham and his fellow soldiers learned not only technical skills but teamwork, because success depended on coordination. Each balloon launched into the sky symbolized protection for soldiers below, even if the men controlling them rarely received recognition. By 1943, he was deployed overseas to England. There, he waited months of preparation, anticipation, and uncertainty. Soldiers understood something enormous was coming, but details remained secret. Life in camp meant drills, maintenance, and conversation about home. For Parham, it meant reflection on the unlikely journey from Virginia fields to foreign soil. War transforms geography into memory, and each mile traveled added to the sense that destiny was unfolding. Then came June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious invasion in history. Allied forces storming the beaches of Normandy in an attempt to break Nazi control over Europe. Parham's battalion was among those assigned to support the operation. Landing in later waves at Omaha Beach, he stepped into a landscape already scarred by battle. Smoke lingered over the shore. Bodies and debris marked the cost of entry. Gunfire echoed from fortified cliffs. Fear was unavoidable. He would later admit as much. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action despite it. His mission began almost immediately. Barrage balloons needed to be launched quickly to defend the vulnerable landing area. Amid chaos, exhaustion, and danger, Parham and his unit deployed equipment and lifted protective shields into the sky. Their presence discouraged enemy aircraft attacks and contributed to securing the beachhead. They remained in Normandy for weeks, living in trenches, sleeping little, and constantly maintaining their defensive systems. War at that level wasn't cinematic heroics. It was endurance, tension, and quiet persistence. For 68 days, he remained there, doing his duty, not charging with rifles into headlines, but sustaining a protective system that helped the invasion survive, and survival was victory in those early days. The foothold established in Normandy eventually led to the liberation of France and the collapse of Nazi control in Western Europe. Every contribution mattered, including his recognition did not arrive immediately. Like many black veterans, Parham returned home without celebration or equal acknowledgement. He resumed civilian life, working, raising family, and carrying memories few fully understood. Decades passed. History books slowly caught up. In 2013, France awarded him the Legion of Honor, its highest distinction, recognizing his role in its liberation. It was a moment of delayed gratitude, bridging generations between sacrifice and acknowledgement. He lived to see his story remembered, eventually becoming the last surviving African-American combat veteran of D-Day. Before his death in 2021, at the age of 99, his longevity allowed him to share perspective, not as a symbol, but as a witness, someone who had seen history unfold firsthand. Henry Parham's journey is not a tale of celebrity heroism. It is the story of steady courage, a life shaped by hardship, service, and quiet perseverance. From segregated beginnings to historic battlefields, from overlooked contributions to international honor, his path reflects the complexity of both war and humanity. And in remembering him, we don't just recount events. We acknowledge the countless individuals whose determination carried history forward, even when the world wasn't watching.